Guys, welcome back to the Corrective Culture Podcast. Today we have Russell Sturgess, who has had a really, and continues to have a really big life. You've done osteopathy, you've done Bowen therapy, you're massively into tarot and the soul, and yeah, just a really interesting human. And we heard you on Paul's podcast and we thought, man, he's from here. We've got to have him on. Like,
yeah.
So welcome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I guess for people listening, like if I know you would have done this before many times, but a little introduction into, I guess, how everyone has a bit of a story, right? But how did you get into that path of working with the body, I guess, to begin with?
So I was raised in a household where diet and nutrition were really important. My grandmother used to go and see a health professional in the valley back in the 40s,
Wow.
and 50s. You know, so it was sort of. I can remember as a little kid, probably would have been early 60s, sitting, watching her have a massage and sort of trying to work out why somebody would be slapping somebody and they would like that. It was depotement. Depotement. It was sort of like, and that was from when I was sort of 6 years old. And so we were living, mum and dad moved to Dalby, which is my hometown, just a couple of months before I was born. And a chiropractor had come in from America and into the town, and we started going to this chiropractor from when I was quite young, and then found out about an osteopath in Toowoomba and started to go to him, and then one day he said to me, would you be interested in learning massage? And so during my school holidays I used to go and work for him from when I was 15 during my school holidays, and I used to do 12-hour days. You'd start at 6 in the morning and go till 6 at night.
Wow.
I used to pay 85 cents an hour.
Wow.
Oh my God.
And,
In Toowoomba, you said?
In Toowoomba.
Yeah.
And by the time I finished high school, he just said to me, he said, son, you're so gifted. He said, don't waste it. And so we sort of did some research, and at that point went to Sydney. So at the age, I turned 17 in the November when I finished high school, and I was at 17 in a few months, and I was in Sydney a few months later. Didn't know anybody, didn't know Sydney, and you know, started my studies in complementary health. And
It was where my dad was born, in Dalby, actually. I wonder if there's...
how interesting.
Yeah. How old are you?
I'm 66.
He's 67, yeah.
And what's your dad's name?
Murray Krause. Yeah, so...
Okay.
Yeah, the Krauses, I'm not sure.
Yes, yeah, the Krauses are a Dalby name.
Yeah, right.
No way, that's cool.
Yeah, he took me out there once, and I went to this it was like a milkshake bar or something. I can't remember what it was. It was something, but I remember getting a milkshake when I was a kid there. It was like a 4-hour drive, and I was like, "Well, this is where it was, eh?"
Yeah.
Middle of nowhere. Hey?
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, it is. It is cool out there. So when you're doing 12-hour days, was that like 12 massages basically with a little break here and there?
No,
or?
generally half-hour massages.
Okay.
And I get an hour in the middle of the day for lunch.
Yeah.
And it was half-hour massages, and and then so eventually I went to Sydney, studied in Sydney, came back to Dalby, and opened a practice in Dalby, doing sort of body work and all different forms, but most of it was soft tissue, and osteopathy is primarily in its classical form was mostly soft tissue.
Okay.
Very, very sort of little manipulative stuff at all. It was primarily...
Apparently it's changed a lot now.
Yes. Well, what happened was while I was at college, in fact, the Manipulations Act was enacted in most of the states in Australia. And other than, I think, pretty well Victoria, all the rest of the states, it became commandeered by chiropractic. And so the college that I was actually going to was no longer able to teach osteopathy because it didn't match the criteria established under the Manipulations Act, which was aligned with chiropractic.
Right.
And so, in their traditional explanations, chiropractic works on the principle that structure governs function. Osteopathy was that function governs structure.
Yeah.
And so they were diametrically opposed, but they've now been fully integrated into one thing now.
Yeah.
And so that was what I was exposed to. And but Dalby's a town of 10,000 people, and when I sold my practice in the 90s, late 90s, I had 5,500 clients. I was treating 125 people a week.
Wow.
By myself, mainly Bowen. Most of my work was Bowen therapy at that stage.
And is that a small session? Or?
No, so the thing about Bowen is that there's wait time. So you manipulate the fascia, and then you've got to let the body respond to that. And so I used to have 4 treatment rooms, and I'd go from room to room to room, treating people during the 2-minute waits.
Wow.
And let their body have that break. And so that's how I sort of treated the number of people that I did.
That's awesome.
Did you like burn out doing that?
Well, I did.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I needed 125 people to say how bloody awesome you are in order for me to feel good about myself.
Right.
But in fact, you still don't believe it because your narrative, your childhood narrative, still says I'm different, I'm weird, you know. And that was my narrative, was that I was ADD, and so I sort of didn't fit in. I was on the, you know, I was raised a Mormon. I was into natural health. I used to go to school with sandwiches that were homemade bread that had sort of sliced apple with grated carrot and cheese and sultanas on it, you know, and everyone else is eating Vegemite and peanut butter and honey, and so like, do you want to swap? And never happened.
Yeah, fully.
You know, and so I needed client number 126.
Yeah.
I needed 127 in order for me to have this sense that I'm actually okay, because it was going to never happen. And not only did I burn out, but the ongoing effect of that narrative was I ended up being 143 kg at one stage.
Yeah, so you're just on the grind the whole time.
Yeah.
Food became, you know, having been raised a Mormon, I left the church in my 30s, but having been raised a Mormon, alcohol and drugs and all that sort of thing weren't a part of my life.
Yeah.
You know, so I didn't resort to that, but food was acceptable.
Yeah.
And so that's where I went to, was food.
Yeah.
And I just kept on putting the weight on. And as I said, 146 kgs is a big man.
Yeah.
And
it looks like you've lost a lot of that.
well, there's certainly, I sit around 90 kg now.
Wow.
Sometimes,
Yeah. And that's a whole nother body.
It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How what was the catalyst for you to like shift that weight? Like, was it a health crisis or was it something else?
No, so I had got on to, big story, but my investigation into the Marseille Tarot wasn't for divining purposes. I wasn't interested in that. When I was studying after I finished doing the body work, it's worth telling. My dad died in 1987, and I had a series of dreams where he came and taught me about universal love in a language that hadn't been part of my upbringing.
Wow.
And in the last dream, he said, "This is the last dream. Is there anything you want to know?" And I said, "Yeah, how does Mormonism fit into truth?" And he said, "I'll show you." And he took his hand and sort of drew a big circle, and there was this ball of light that was like 15 foot, and it was so brilliant that it made everything translucent. That's how he said, "That's truth." And he took his finger and drew a little circle, and it just left a little outline. And he said, "That's the Mormon Church. It's a tiny part of a much bigger truth." And he said to me, "Son, go and find the bigger truth."
Wow.
And that literally became the point at which I started to step away from the Mormon Church. But a couple of months later, my mother gave me a copy of a book called Teach Only Love, written by Jerry Jampolsky, who was Course in Miracles based. And everything in this book was what my dad had been talking to me about in these dreams. So I went and got every book that I could get on Jerry Jampolsky, and next thing, 6 months later, Jerry Jampolsky's at the Relaxation Centre in Brisbane.
Wow.
And we're talking 1988. And so I attend that workshop with Jerry Jampolsky, and he said, "Come to my centre in Tiburon." And I said, "Well, that's a nice thought, but I can't afford it. You know, I've got a mortgage." And anyway, letter turns up a couple of months later. "Congratulations, you've won an all expenses paid trip to the United States."
God.
And my wife had at the time had sent in a muffins packet competition, and we won it.
Man.
Wow.
And next thing I was
That's
studying.
trippy.
You know, and there were lots of things.
Yeah.
But where it ended up going was another lady who was teaching attitudinal healing in Washington, D.C. that I'd been put on to, did a lot of Jungian stuff. And during that time there, I came across a book called Jungian Tarot. And it spoke to me in a way that I did not expect, because tarot, based on my religious background, was sort of the book of the devil.
Yeah.
But it just had an impact on me that was really quite profound. And in fact, not long after that, I was in Boston speaking at a conference. I ended up making headways into teaching Bowen therapy in the United States, and I used to lecture 6 months of the year spaced out at teaching Bowen over there. And I was in Boston, and I walked past. I was in a sort of like a game shop, and there was a whole thing full of tarot cards. And this voice said, buy those cards. And there's a very specific set. I'm not buying a pack of tarot cards. Yeah. And I kept on, go back and buy those cards. And I'm thinking, what the heck? Anyway, bought the cards, sat in a cupboard for a couple of years, and ended up really connecting with this work that I'd been doing and reading this book on Jungian Tarot, it was called, by Sally Nichol. And all of a sudden, she had connected that she saw that there was a Christian connection with this, and it was good, but it just didn't seem right to me. And I thought, I'll just keep that back in my mind. And I was doing mandalas and all those sorts of things as part of the tradition of what I've been studying and where I've been going. And I started to incorporate the tarot images in that, and it was really quite bizarre. And it became so strong, I felt, I need to write about this. I've got this really strong sense that I've got something worthwhile to write about. And so I ended up going to Italy, and I lived in Italy for a year while I researched the origins of the Marseille Tarot.
Wow.
And,
that's awesome.
And then ended up writing my first book about the deep spiritual roots of the tarot as it related to what I would call heretical Christianity as it was seen by the Catholic Church. And, so what has that got to do with my weight? Well, all of a sudden I realised this transformative journey was in there, and it required a certain discipline. And I was so far not involved in that. And I'm thinking, if I want to teach this stuff, I need to walk the talk.
Yeah,
and
right.
so the first place that I realised I was out of balance was obviously about my weight. And so somebody had told me about the Camino de Santiago, the pilgrim's walk across northern Spain. And it infected me. It was sort of like, my God, I've got to do that. But you can't do that when you're 143 kg. So I literally started training. I used to live, what's the street next to the Marucci River there?
Dewporth?
Dewporth Avenue. I used to live on Dewporth Avenue, and I used to walk from Dewporth out to at Malulbar.
The spit. Yeah.
And back to Dewporth Avenue.
I used to run that.
I used to walk that, and I spent 18 months.
Wow.
And I basically, my weight dropped back to about 95 kg.
Wow.
And then I walked the Camino de Santiago, which was and I did some extras. So I walked 1,000 kilometres with a backpack.
Wow.
And it was as fit as, and was able to do it. And by the time I came back, I was 85 kg from that. And some days I would walk 50 kilometres in a day. And if you'd have said that to me 2 years before that, I'd say, what are you smoking?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Why'd you choose Italy? Just because of the Rome or?
No, because I understood that was where the Marseille Tarot actually began.
Oh, okay.
And so I wanted to, and I went and researched the origins of the Marseille Tarot. And in fact, since then, I've been able to bring a whole new breadth of understanding to these cards that nobody's written about before in terms of my research about where they came from and why they ended up emerging there when they did, and more to the point. And once again, this is one of these weird things that happens. Through people in the area that I lived in Brisbane at the time, they owned an apartment in a little village called Monte San Biagio, halfway between Rome and Naples. And so I rented this off them. And one of the things they said, while you're there, you've got to make sure you go to Monte Cassino. And Monte Cassino is, it's got a lot of history to do with World War II, but there's a whole lot of other things. But it had Gregorian chanting there, and Gregorian chanting is 5th century living history, you know. And I thought, I've got to go and see that. So rode our little 250 Honda scooter all the way across to this. That's the only transport I had in Italy, and I was sitting waiting for this service to start. And once again, every once in a while, it doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while, I guess if the universe says, Russell needs a bit of a prompt here, and this voice said, Russell, welcome back. You've come back to finish what you've started previously, and now it's time for you to finish it.
Wow.
And I had, when I came off Ciampino Airport, when I came off the plane, I had this really amazing sensation as if I had come home. And there's no Italian blood in my family, nothing. You know, we're Irish and English in terms of our roots. And just to have that feeling was very, very bizarre. And literally from that point on, I literally just essentially started downloading information. So I didn't have books with me. I had no reference books other than I got to meet some really fascinating people, some interesting doors open up in terms of historical stuff and research and
Just stuff that's meant to be.
Yeah, wrote my first book and then developed a mindfulness mentoring program based on what I realised they were teaching in these tools.
Yeah.
And so that then became the basis of the work that I've done ever since. Is what happened then.
What's Marseille Tarot?
So Marseille. So what happened? The very first tarot that we know of was the Visconti Sforza. The Sforza and Visconti were the people who ruled Milan during the sort of 12th century, sort of, but 13th and 14th century. And they'd been excommunicated by the church. And my whole thesis in my book was that the 22 major arcana, they're the major cards, actually came out or were inspired by the Cathar, who were in the Languedoc in southern France, and they were genocided by the Catholic Church and wiped out. And those that were left made their way either up into the Pyrenees or into northern Italy. And so they settled in that area there. And so, long story short, the first cards that emerged was in this area there, and they were called the Visconti Sforza cards. What happened was during the Italian Wars, when France invaded during 1500, they actually the biggest library was in the Visconti Sforza area in a place called just outside of Milan. The name's slipped my mind, but they had a huge library there, and literally it was completely taken by the French. They took everything that was in there, and they would have taken tarot cards from there as well. So what happened was tarot cards became a game. So when they first, first of all, playing cards were introduced into 1370 into Milan. So it's the first time we see playing cards introduced into Western Europe. This is the same time that the Cathar are being finally you had the crusade that went from 1209 through to about 1230, and then you had the Inquisition that went right up to the middle of the 1300s, and they basically systematically wiped out the Cathars, and so to salvage their teachings, and they didn't have churches, so they would have used manuscripts. Their teachings were put into these 22 picture cards. Right. And they were eventually joined with playing cards, and they were made into a game called Il Trionfi, which is the triumphs. And of course you had Dante and Petrarch and other philosophers were teaching the concept of triumphs, things triumphing over other things. Yeah. In fact, Petrarch wrote a book, Il Trionfi. So these cards became a game called the Game of Trumps, and they actually didn't become called the Tarocchi until the 1700s. Mm-hmm. Right. So that whole concept of divination or divining with cards didn't actually emerge until the 1700s. Up until then, it was a game and it was a hidden spiritual map.
Wow. A hidden spiritual map. That's a really cool way of putting it.
Yeah. And so what ended up happening was that after the religious wars in France during the 1600s, where there were literally hundreds of thousands of people were killed, and it was a battle for religious freedom, where that battle freed the control of the Catholic Church from Christianity, and it meant Protestantism could thrive without any fear of judgment from the church. Lots of people lost their lives for it. But that religious freedom meant there were lots of other freedoms, and this became the Age of Enlightenment, as they called it. And this is when new knowledge started to be. And all of a sudden, one of the earliest sets of cards is the Noble tarot cards turn up in 1650, and then we see the Dodal in 1700, and these became known as the Marseille Tarot. Because they were being manufactured in Marseille. They had printing presses and they were able to duplicate. There was a sort of a canon, if you know what that word means. So they had a standard of what the images were and what the messages were, which that didn't change. I know that you're studying the stuff with Rider-Waite, which turned up in the 1800s. Yeah. And so this was a complete revamp of that and gave it a whole different feel in many regards.
Is it the same like with the Marseille Tarot? Like is it from full to the sun? Is that the 22 major arcana, or is it?
Yeah.
So it's the same principle.
The same principle,
Okay.
but the messaging in the symbology changed.
Okay.
And so the symbols, I would say they might have kept 50% of the core symbols.
Cool.
I'm saying that roughly.
Okay.
But as far as I'm concerned, they left out some really significant ones or
Wow.
transposed them. That doesn't stop people getting amazing wisdom and knowledge from right away. But I think that there's another whole level. I'm biased.
That's cool. So what deck could I buy to research that myself?
Oh, look! If you find the Dodale or the Noble,
Noble,
there's another one called Fornia.
Yep.
In fact, in QBD bookshops,
Yep.
they actually have a box of tarot
Okay.
in there for $19.99. You'll
Cool.
pay $60 or $70 for these others.
Yeah.
And it's got a full set of the major arcana. Only the major. Oh no, might have all of them.
Okay.
But anyway, for $19.90, you can get
Nice.
the Marseille Tarot
That's so cool.
at QBD. For those of you in Queensland listening to this, yeah.
And it's quite out there for people like tarot, like, you know, what you said earlier, like you were raised in the church, and it's like the book of the devil. And even like I still get some hitbacks from people like, what is that weird stuff you do? Like, how could you explain it? Like how you said, it's like a hidden spiritual map. But I've had some really profound experiences. Like, what are some of those profound experiences that you've had and used it as a guiding tool for you through your life?
So my approach, and this is funny. Look, I've spoken at tarot conferences in England, France, America, New Zealand, Australia.
Yep.
And I'll be the only person there that doesn't do tarot reading.
Yeah, true.
Literally.
Yeah.
And so my focus isn't on the minor arcana at all. So
Yeah.
they use those to give inspiration. I know Paul teaches that in a really lovely way. But my personal focus is on the spiritual map as it relates to the major arcana. And so, the way in which, even how I lay the cards out, when you look at the hat of the magician and that, which this only relates to the Marseille Tarot, not to newer tarot, and you look at the strength card, which is card number 1 and card 11, which begin at 2 sequences of 10, their hats were the same shape, which was a lemniscate, an infinity symbol was the shape of their hat. And while I was in Italy starting to write my book, I had this epiphany one day. I went, oh, this is the key to unlock how the cards are to be laid out. All of a sudden, I put the cards into an
Figure
infinity
eight.
sign and put the world card number 21 in the middle. And all of a sudden, I had cards 1 to 10 on one side and cards 11 to 20 on the other. The Cathar used to teach the fact that there are 2 worlds, the world of the evil god and the world of the good god. And the world of the evil god was depicted on the left-hand side, which is about the world of illusion. The magician's the first card. He's saying, this is all about an illusion. I'm a trickster. And then the strength card is about, she's got a zigzag of effulgence, which is like a crown on her head, which is a statement of the crowning glory of Christ consciousness using Christian language. But she's saying, if you're coming down this route, and this route where she is the entrance to is the dark night of the soul. So he said, you're going to need 2 things, a clear vision of where you want to go spiritually, which is my crown, the zigzag, it's enlightenment. And you're going to have courage and fortitude and strength because you won't be able to go through the dark night without it. And the very first card after her is the Hanged Man. And he's hanging upside down. And in the original Marseille, there's these 2 trunks of trees and a sort of a branch across the top that he's hanging off. And they've had all of their branches pruned. Well, they've been pruned by justice, time and chance. So on the other side, in the world of illusion, we come into a situation where we've got the Emperor and the Empress. They're about authority or compliance. That's our mother and father, and they program us to believe that life's a certain way. This is how life is. This is how you do it. She teaches us family values, and Dad exposes us to cultural and societal values and global values, but the ones that he aligns with, and that's what we get exposed to, and that's what we think it's all about. The Pope card, the Pope at that time is wearing a triple tiara, not a single tiara, so that's a 3-level crown. He says, I'm the king, I'm the emperor, and I'm the Pope, and you've got to all be subservient to me. He was about status. And the two people kneeling in front of him are bald, or they've got tonsils, they're bald on top with hair. They were the Franciscans, who were the poor monks. So this is saying wealth and status is part of the world of illusion, as compliance and authority is.
Yeah, right.
And then we've got the lovers. And in the lovers card, there's, once again, they changed this, but you've got Eros and you've got the central figure, who is the fool, with two characters. He's got an older woman and a younger woman. Well, in Greek tradition, they represent Eros, lover, Storge, family, and Philia, friends. And so all of a sudden, this is saying any of your connection with these here is an illusionary love. They're not real loves because they're not sustainable if you get caught up in those relationships. How many people get their worlds turned upside down because of a partner or because of a family issue or because of friends? You know, and of course then we end up with the Chariot, and the Chariot was the symbol of success or achievement. And that was the victor. It was the victor's chariot. And so this is about having succeeded. Well, the magician says none of those things are real. You can invest all the time you want to into compliance, into status, into approval and achievement, but none of it's going to be sustainable. And the reason it's not sustainable is because natural justice comes along. If you spend too much time working your ass off and you're working and working and working in order to build status and success, you're going to burn out. Nobody's punishing you with burnout. That's natural justice. It's the natural consequence of not being in a place of balance. And so what happens is old man time, the hermit, his name was originally Il Tempo, which means time. And this is aging. As you get older, all of a sudden, things that you had the energy to do and what have you, you can't do it anymore. You know, things are changing. And then we have the Wheel of Fortune. And so 1 minute you can have it and the next minute can be taken away and you've got no control over that. If you're attached to those things as the measure of how I can be happy, then you're going to suffer. And that's the beginning of the dark night of the soul, is that point where we've had it all stripped away. And based on this sort of lemniscate shape, we have one of four places we can go. If we stay where we are in our suffering, I call that the place of antidepressants. That's how we survive. If we don't have a tool to change or to do anything different, we numb ourselves through medication, addictions, like consumerism or drugs or whatever. Even New Age, excuse the French, New Age shit and glitter. We get caught up in this airy-fairy stuff without doing the real work. The other option is suicide. And people are making that, whether it be fast suicide or slow suicide. We've got a lot of people committing slow suicide, diabetics that keep on eating the wrong food and you know, doing all that sort of thing. Some people have got the energy to come back and do it again. So I leave my wife, I get a new partner, I get a new car, I change my outfit, create a new life, and I'm going to create the illusion again. And of course, instead of taking 20 or 30 years, which used to be called midlife crisis, at 55 years, so you'd have a midlife crisis because all the things you valued didn't matter anymore. We now have that at 40. And what happens is people come around that curve again and they do it in 5 years or 6 years. Right. But you still come back to that same intersection. And then the other one is the fourth option is the dark night of the soul, which is the spiritual journey. And so what these guys had was a very, very clear sense of what you had to progress through in order to come to this place of living life where beauty, and I don't mean beauty as in looks, but beauty as in taste and touch. So how the perceptions engage life, touch, taste, sight, sound and smell, embrace beauty. You know, we talk about food and what we should eat. What we should be eating is food that smells and touches and tastes and, you know, and does good. But it's like, it's not just enough to take vitamins. We should be going to the effort to have it look beautiful and taste beautiful, which we can do in a way that's loving and respectful. So beauty, inner peace, where we live lives that are enmeshed in peace. Part of the reason why I live in a rainforest, and in the Hindu tradition, the stage after the world of illusion they call the forest dweller. And that's what I am. I'm a forest dweller because it's a place of peace and beauty. I get to experience that every single day of my life. The third element is agape, which is love. That's divine love. And that's that having that ability to bring social justice to what you do. It's about bringing forgiveness to everything that you do. It's about bringing charity, which is not social justice. Charity is pure love, Christ-like love, to how you live your life. It's a love that's fully enmeshed in that way of turning up in the world. And so what does that look like in a relationship? I have a beautiful relationship, and my partner and I have been together for 10 years. But if Rosie was to turn to me today and she says, I need to move on, I'd be able to say, thank you for having blessed my life. If there's anything I can do to continue to support or help, let me know.
That's amazing.
And there would not be, there'd be sadness because we enjoy each other, but it wouldn't be grief. There wouldn't be anger. There would be total gratitude for everything that we've enjoyed in our relationship. And I'd say, in 10 years, we may have had a couple of times in 10 years where we had some tension, but there was no anger or there wasn't any. It was we just knew that we weren't in our stillness in those places a couple of times, but that's where that sort of love goes, and it would be the same with family or friends. You're not attached to anything, yet you can be fully immersed in love with those people.
That sounded nice.
I know, and that's what my dad gave me. He asked me the day, I wasn't kind of ready for it, but you're like, how? I said, my dad was a spiritual man. You said, how so? And that's how he was a spiritual man. He was he was so unconditional loving. Like I could tell him the worst of things that I've done or I did, or the deepest, darkest shadow stuff. And he would just go, oh, I love you, son. That's and it's so freeing. Yeah. Like when exactly what you said then, when you look at your partner and they say, hey, if they say, hey, I want to go and be with that person now. And you go, I love you. Thank you so much. It's such a freeing feeling. Hey, it's unconditional love.
Yeah. And that's unusual. They'd be like, oh, what do you mean?
Well, you probably wouldn't even attract a breakup.
Exactly. Because you're on that. Yeah, that's unique, man. And you did get that from your dad. You're really good at not judging in regards to we all judge a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But not judging in regards to, I don't know, someone in your circle anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Because we're all human, and that's what you said the other day when we were having a chat too about humans are animals. Yeah, and I thought that was such a good way to put it. In their primal form.
Yeah, prime form. They're an animal, and the journey is about and it's really interesting because the Fool card has a dog.
Yeah.
Hanging off his ass, basically. And he's moving away from that, which is about moving away from your animalistic. So all of the aggression and the anger and the abuse that we see happening in the world is the animal behaviour. But as we move more and more to connecting with our soul essence, we move further away from that animal behaviour and we become oriented towards love. And these things, and the fourth element, just while I think of it, the fourth element in that is fulfillment or supreme happiness. It's living a life where what you do at the end of the day and at the beginning of each day has you filled with this sense of gratitude because of the fulfilling nature of how you live your life. And that's how I live my life.
Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
When is that the path for all, or is there an avenue of skipping the dark night of the soul and jumping into that earlier? Is that a thing?
So what happens is people have moments of that, but it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And even when you've gone through the dark night of the soul, it's like all of your energies now in the stage of, I call it the path of transcendence, the map for transcendence. You're in there, but every once in a while, all of a sudden, mum dies. So my mum died 2 years ago. Okay, and I was with her. She'd gone to hospital and I'd gone down the day before she died. She passed very, very early in the morning, and I was with her and we were talking, and I gave her a treatment. Bowen's very, very, she loves a Bowen treatment. I gave her a treatment, and it was beautiful because my mum wasn't very expressive around love, and she came through that era where that wasn't part of what you did. And I went to leave the room, her hospital room, and I got downstairs and I realised I'd said goodbye, and I got downstairs and realised I'd left my glasses and I needed them for driving. So I went back up, and I was there late anyway, but they let me back in to get my glasses, and I said to Mum, "Oh, look, I've left my glasses here," and found where my glasses were, and I said, "I'll see you in the morning." And as I went to walk out, she said, "Son," I turned around, she said, "I love you." Mm-hmm. That didn't come out of my mother's mouth very often. The last words I heard her say was, "I love you." Were there tears? Yeah, there were tears in that particular place. I was lucky enough that I got to my brother's, asked me if I'd do the funeral service, and we didn't do it in the church. We did it out at the gravesite, and we had all these people out there, and I made it a celebration.
Yeah.
And, you know, she loved fairies, so I talked about her fairies, and I played a song from one of the Disney movies about fairies, and she loved dancing, and she had a piece of music that she loved, and one of my biggest memories, my mum and dad, was watching them dance. I had everyone up dancing
It's so
at the
good.
funeral.
Yeah.
You know, and it became a celebration. It was a joyful experience of celebrating. People weren't there with tears.
Yeah.
They were there with joy and embracing the spirit of who this woman was in a really positive way.
Yeah.
And it was a joyful celebration. I had so many people say, "I've never seen a funeral service like that before."
Yeah.
Wow.
I think that's important, and I totally agree. That's how we should run them. Like, my dad passed away a little while ago, and at the funeral, like, it was very morbid, and it was very like, I was just looking around. I was like, everyone's hiding. And I was like, I wasn't going to hide because I knew the consequences of hiding, and I knew that I would hold it.
Yeah.
So I was just like, fuck, like, is there a way we can do this? That sounds like the right way to do it. I think it's just like somehow celebrate. And I know the wake's meant to be that, but why not just celebrate their life in that way? I think it's important. And I think just maybe Western culture, we've really, we've done that. But do you think your mum, when she was passing, she said, "I love you," because her ego and her like religious background and all of that hard stuff was falling away, and she could fully just see life for what it was? Or what was the...
I wrote a book which was sort of like an autobiography called "Get Out of Jail Card," and she read my book, and in that I pointed out that my mother didn't say to me that she loved me very much. So she was very aware that she didn't communicate that. And it was interesting, after I published that book, you know, whenever I went to visit my mum, she made a point of giving me a big hug and saying, "I love you." I mean,
that's nice.
So for the last few years before she passed away, she did that. I mean, there was awakening up for her around that, and I think she realised that her time was close now, and I think that she said those words because she was inspired. At that point.
Do you find, like, it sounds like the same when my dad, he was in hospital with his mum, my grandma, when she passed, and he's in a Feldenkrais. So he was doing like a Feldenkrais sort of stuff on her while she passed. And I remember seeing her and like seeing the like she could, I don't think she could see me really, you know what I mean, by this point. I'm not sure. Who knows? But do you feel like there's fear of death in those last moments from these
some people?
Yeah, is that a thing?
For some people?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I think so. I mean, we have ideas about what that is, but I think though that if you've got, you know, one of the interesting stories was out of the Cathar was that 1244 was the last major resistance by the Cathar in southern France in the Languedoc. And there were 400 Cathar in Montsegur, which was a castle up on the top of a very, very steep mountain. So they were protected by virtue of the geography, but they ran out of food and water and they had to surrender. And basically the ultimatum was become a Catholic or commit to Catholicism or be burnt alive. And 200 of the people decided that they chose to be burnt alive.
Wow.
And without resistance, the story goes, these 200 people walked voluntarily into this corral and basically were burnt alive.
Wow.
And there may have been moments of fear and pain and that, but they had a bigger picture of what was on the other side.
Yeah.
And by making that choice, they were committed to, they felt that if they did that, they wouldn't be reincarnated. They'd have the opportunity to be connected with God eternally in that point. So that was enough motive for them to step into that and do it.
In regards to what you said earlier about like these, I feel like I'm in that stage of life now when you talk about the superficial things of like I got to get everything rolling, got to get the house, got to get, you got to make sure you can provide for this and whatnot. But I also have a feeling like I think of the awareness. Say I visualize living on the beach, right? You visualize the rainforest. I grew up on the beach, so I visualize living on the beach. The sound of it, the smell of it feels like home for me. But I also have already visualized the moment that I get the keys, walk into the house. It's the same as where I'm living now, basically. My happiness will be after a week of that, And I know there's going to be things being able to walk, to the ocean, but they're still back to present moment. I'm still sitting in a lounge room watching TV or cooking dinner. And I love all that, right? But I'm aware of that's not going to be it. And I know that's the culture that we grew up in. I went to Caloundra High here as a kid, and it was just like every high school was like you get your loan, you get the house, and you get the missus, you get the dog, and that's it. That's success. That was deemed success.
That's our programming.
Yeah. And I'm already aware of, in my head, that's all going to happen without a doubt, and I'm certain of it, and I'm certain it's all going to come in. But I'm also, there's that feeling in the back knowing, oh, that's not it. Like, what is it?
Because it can all go.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
You see, beauty, peace, love, and joy doesn't go. Justice, time, and chance don't have any impact on that. Once you're fully aligned with that, then it's permanent because it's already there. It's just covered over by the clouds of stress and suffering, and and all that stuff already exists. We're just not in touch with it, because it's not a priority. We've never been taught to do that, And just for clarity, I live in the mountains because of stillness, which could be achieved anywhere.
Yeah.
When one of the cards you've got the Hanged Man, and then you've got the Mourning card. And this is what you were saying, where you externalize your grief, and that's what heals your grief. Blessed are those that mourn. This is the Beatitude, for they shall be comforted. The other one is, the next one is blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And that's about when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Well, that starts with people. You have teachers, physical teachers, and you have books. But that, and what we have is people that continue to have physical teachers and books. And they're stuck in that.
Yeah.
The next teacher has to be divine guidance. And that's where the tarot cards came for me, because now I was studying the tarot cards without a teacher, and I was being inspired and given direction, Holy Spirit of wisdom, if you want to call it, whatever you want to call that. But now I'm getting knowledge from within, not my own mind, but the way in which Spirit speaks to me. And now I've moved to the mountains to get teaching from stillness.
Yeah.
And that's why I live there.
Yeah.
It's not for the house. It's not even for the forest. It's for the teacher. Be still and know that I am God.
That's a good.
That's so good. You inspired me the other day. I went out for my first nature walk alone yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like in a long time. Like I've probably done little ones, but it's been a while since I've connected to nature, and I just walked up a creek I was gone for like 3 hours, but it was...
And how was that?
It was good. It was good. I just feel so good today, and I just feel so grounded and so recharged, and I just sat out there alone and just... I was like, man, I knew too, like the universe has been kicking me going, hey, connect. You got to get by yourself and connect.
Cool.
And I was like, when I was driving home, I was so high. I was just like,
really?
Fuck, what other ones could I do? Like, just go, like, what?
Did you have anything that came through while you were out there? I know, like with Rami, just you and the dog. That's nice.
Not really. No, I just was listening to the silence. I was just like, you know what? I don't want to think. I'm done thinking. I just was like, to be honest, like there was a lot of really slippery rocks and stuff the whole way up the river. So I was really present, trying to not slip and fall. And I fell twice, but like fell in the water, and I was just like laughing. And I was like, I've never had so much fun alone. But I was like, man, I feel like that's important. And I did get a sense of driving back in here. I got a sense of driving back in here. I was like, it's not it. Like I was like, it's too busy. I was like, it's too busy in here. And it was a feeling that came up inside me. And I was like, because I just bought a house around here, and I was like, but you've made the right choice with living here, because that's what you need right now to build a business and stuff. But just know that I'm always here. Yeah. And that's the kind of message I had from yesterday. Yeah. But even since then, I've been having some crazy dreams. I don't know. Do you know much about dreaming? And I mean, is it the astral world talking to you, or like?
Look, I think that there's a whole lot of things about dreams that can be very, very instructive. The beauty about dreaming is that the gift of dreams is that it is teaching us that, you see, while we're in the dream, it's real. While you're in the dream, it's real. And how real is it when you wake up?
True.
Can you ever be charged for murdering somebody in a dream?
No.
Can you ever feel guilty about having an affair in a dream?
No.
Now, this is going to be a tough one for people to take, but this is just a dream. We're in God's dream.
Yeah.
This is God imagining what God isn't. This is God exploring infinite possibility.
Yeah.
And the minute God wakes up, guess what? None of this is real.
Yeah, I know.
And so, what's happened is we've passed through this portal, and this is depicted in the world card. There's a beautiful image of what's called a vesicus Pisces or a mandala. It's an almond-shaped wreath, and that's the sacred yoni. It's the birth passage of the Divine Mother. And we come from infinite consciousness into we come into the spirit world to start off with, and that's where the Popess and the Emperor and the Magician are. They're in the spirit world, and the two qualities of the divine prior to coming into existence is energy and essence. And when energy and essence manifests into spirit form, it takes on spirit and soul. Spirit is energy, soul is essence, and then when spirit and soul incarnate and take on this part of the dream, we then take on physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So the creative or the energetic elements are mind and desire, and the essence areas are feelings and perceptions. In the way in which we engage perceptions. They're the essence elements. And so what we've got is this sort of densening, and then eventually those four elements become physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual in terms of, and these were depicted by the bull, the lion, the eagle, and the angel around that vesicus Pisces. You've got the vesicus Pisces with the bull, the lion, the eagle, and the angel, and they're symbolising this density that's being created of energy and essence, which are the two core qualities of the divine. And so all we are is we're in this place where, if you can imagine, God's pretending that there's something that it isn't. Because that's it can only through localizing itself can it have an experience that isn't itself.
Yeah.
Because it's everything.
Yeah. I know. And that's the deep feeling of like knowing that you can't quite understand. It's like you try and look at it and it looks away, or something. It's like,
well, but that's what the journey's about.
Yeah.
And that's what these guys are teaching, is that there is a point of non-duality, which is the point between the Sun card and the Judgment card. You've got these two characters that are in the Sun card in the Marseille Tarot. They're doing an embrace. It's called a holy embrace. In the ancient temples, there was a ritual embrace, which was symbolic of non-duality, of becoming one. And then we go to the Judgment card, and here's this character coming up out of the ground where they've been buried. And it's half male, half female. If you have a look at it, one side of the body is curvaceous and the other side of the body is masculine. So it's fully integrated the duality into one, and that's the point at which that essence of combination then is allowed to enter back through the sacred yoni, back into the presence of God. Otherwise, outside of that burial site are two people, and they're about to be reincarnated and come back and do it again.
Yeah. I think it's important for people to hear, and whether you're ready to hear that or not, it's so freeing, because like once you realize it's not that serious, you can really create, and you can really help people, and you can really love properly. And I feel like it's you get caught in duality, your separateness, and then you go out in nature and you feel, this is it, and you come back in and you're like, that guy cut me off again. Like it's it's the humanness, like you said.
It's what we were talking about the other day, hey, when I was like, man, it's always presentness.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, I keep getting to this point of like, when you think about the answers and this and that, and then you get to a point of presentness again in regards to, that's the answer. I'm just here right now. I'm not there. I'm not back here. I'm actually here right now. And back to the beauty. I remember reading, the first time I listened to Eckhart Tolle's Power Now, and I asked the universe, I was driving home from a friend's, I go, teach me something out of this book. And it was him talking about, again, a concept around presentness, why you're doing the mundane things. And then I went home, I started doing all these dishes, and I was like, fuck, got to do all these dishes, you know? And then I was like, pulled myself up on it. I was like, okay, let's just do these dishes.
Yeah.
And let's just do them well.
Yeah.
And then it became enjoyable. Third dish in, something had oil all over it. I was like, fuck, this thing's got oil all over it, you know?
Yeah.
And then I like caught it myself again, and I was like, oh man, this is the work.
That's the training.
No, do it again for a month, and then you're like, it's
training.
Yeah, it's training, but you can get back to it. And when you were talking about things that end, like anything that ends, so say if you're trying to find your happiness in even, let's say, children or a partner or whatever it may be, work, when you're talking about the beauty and the things that are everlasting, like what are some examples of that for even yourself?
So it's, we're just talking about what you were just talking about a minute ago with washing up. You know, washing up is an act of gratitude.
Yeah.
You're actually standing there, and these are the remnants of beauty. You've just had a beautiful meal. In my home, I've just had a beautiful meal with nutritious food that tastes beautiful. And I had all these implements that I used to create that. And so as I'm washing these, my consciousness is about the gratitude that these things were part of an experience of beauty.
Yeah.
And so the oily stuff on the plate, because I live where I live and I have a septic system, you know, and what have you, I wipe that off with a bit of paper and put it in the bin. There's no resentment. You know, there's a saying that says, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The only difference is you do it with love and gratitude. And so that then becomes how you live your life.
Right.
Is that everything that you do is done with gratitude. And you know, the traffic thing you talk about. You know, if anyone knows me, they know that I can be a pretty noisy bugger in the car. But I've developed I sit in stillness in the traffic now. I've got a perfect time to sit and be still. While I'm waiting at a red light, or while this guy's trying to decide what he's going to do or whatever. And so all of a sudden now, the shift goes from I'm driving the car, but with awareness. I'm washing up with awareness. I'm in communication with this person in awareness. And so what happens is when you come to the place of awareness, the natural state of awareness is peace, joy, happiness, and love. And that's what you begin to feel in every moment. You know, so you're still going to have a house and a mortgage and a job and do those things. But now the difference is, and I share this story. My partner worked out at the hospital at Caloundra, and she came home and she just hated everything that was going on. And she said, I don't know that I can keep doing this. And I said, what if what you were doing was all about love? That everything that you did was an act of love. And anyway, she decided she would do that. And she told me this story. She said there was one old man that was this, nobody wanted to have anything to do with him in the hospital. And they even used to leave his food at the door and he'd have to get it himself because he was so ornery. You know, they just didn't want to have to deal with him. And she decided to engage him with an act of love. And so she walked in and said, "How are you today?" And he sort of, she said, "My name is Rosie. Some people used to call me Rose." He says, "I have a rose garden." And all of a sudden he talked about his grief at not being able to attend to his rose garden. And there was just this beautiful connection then that happened between her and him in that moment.
Yeah.
And every time she came in, he just engaged her and loved her energy and connected with her. And that's what it's about. It's as simple as the fact that because we are soul being and spirit being, we are the seed of God. So our love is innate in who we are. Peace is innate in who we are. It's there. All we have. I love one of my favourite teachers is a guy by the name of Rupert Spira, and he talks about that core essence of who we are as the blue sky. But so many of us have so many clouds that cover it that the minute that we see a little bit of blue sky, we think that the blue is a cloud because there's so much. But once the cloud dissipates, it's all there. That love, that beauty, that peace is there. And what happens, and this is what this journey is being depicted in these cards, is what it takes. You know, the devil card is sort of right at the intersection. And the devil card is really good because it's saying, here's what the evil is in the world, and all of the symbols in that card align with the mind. The mind is the evil in this world. It's the thing that stops us. It's the thing that creates the clouds. And you know, in terms of practical terms for your listeners, one of the tools that I like to use, and I even use it myself, is I have a business card that says I'm a punctuation expert. And on the back I have a quote, and it's my quote, and it says, God, full stops invite God in, commas push God out. And a full stop is when we just look at the facts. What's the fact? A guy just cut me off in the traffic. Full stop. What do? We put a comma. This guy cut me off, you bastard. And then off we go. As opposed to, I just got cut off in the traffic. Full stop. I'm going to be a minute later than what I was before. Full stop. I'm okay. Full stop. You know, in other words, use full stops
to stop the mind.
Stop using commas. A comma invites the mind. So what is the mind? Our programming. We're not dealing with what's happening now. We're using a filter that's been our experience, the programming of our parents, our society and culture, and now our global, because of the way in which we can access technology, global culture. And that's what's controlling our mind.
Yeah. It's what were we talking about recently with that? I'm having a mind blank right now.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I've been listening to The Power of Now again, and this is like just so fitting because it's just so powerful. I talked to you about the other day about how Eckhart Tolle was talking about someone who's begging on the street. He's like, he looks at people who are obsessed with their mind as people that are beggars, because you're always looking for something outside of yourself to fulfill you. And without having that awareness, like for people listening, I had the same thing. I didn't know that I wasn't my mind until I was like 19. So I literally would be like, someone would cut me off and I'd be like, fuck this guy. Like, he cut me off. Yeah. I don't take that, you know? And it got me in a lot of trouble. It got me in, I was very, very unconscious, very angry, just a lot of stuff. And I feel like once you start to become, you know, like you said the other day again, the watcher, and then you get to the next step. So the first step is like what you said, just putting a full stop, becoming the watcher of your thoughts. Then you become the watcher of the watcher.
Yes.
And that's non-duality, is it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you become aware that you're aware, you actually, you know, when we have a statement, we use this statement all the time. I I'm annoyed that this guy cut me off. What we do is we focus on being cut off, where in fact what we could do is focus on the I am.
Yeah.
And actually put a full stop after I am.
Yeah.
And the I am is that which is knowing that I was cut off. And it's the state of knowing, that which is aware.
Yeah.
Now, there is another level to that, as you just said, and that is then as we start practicing focusing more on the I am than the experience. You can't do both. No. You either do one or the other. As I begin to focus on the I am, then there's that next level is when you recognise I am that I am.
Yeah.
And that's divine consciousness, is when you're aware that you're aware. Now you're knocking on the door of infinite consciousness.
Yeah.
And what's the state of infinite consciousness? Peace, beauty, love and joy.
It reminds me, and
so
what I was going to say is actually what you just said. It's funny that you said it when I was like, I remember how you said years ago you realise that your thoughts aren't you.
Yeah.
And that was your pain at the time.
Yeah.
Because you were thinking about like, whatever, killing people or something. And then you were like, am I a murderer? And you hadn't even done it.
Yeah, I remember it was so powerful. I remember being at my family's house and looking at a surfboard fin, and my thoughts said, you could take that fin off and kill this whole family.
And like everyone's had that, you know? Like,
yeah, I know, but it's like, but I reacted to that thought and I was like, oh my God, I'm a killer. Like I was like, I told Eppo and I was like, take me to the emergency. I'm a fucking killer. Like what's going on? And God, that's how when you let your mind become the master, it can get very dark. And like I had suicidal thoughts, and it's like, so when I was on the plane and I realized that I wasn't my thoughts for the first time, I had that consciousness where you go, my whole body lit up. It was just like, oh my God, I'm never going to be unhappy again.
Yeah.
And going back to the devil card, you know, he's got the solution there. He's got his hand open in air. The element of air is the mind. That's what it relates to. The element of air relates to the mind. Yeah. And he's got his hand open. And so there's no hanging on to anything in the mind. So that's what meditation does. Vipassana, Tai Chi, transcendental meditation. All of these are tools to help you learn to become free of the mind. But he's also hanging on to a flaming sword. And this is really interesting. Even serious Christians don't sort of realise this, but the flaming sword was one of two tests that God put at the gate of the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden. And when he put them out of the garden, he said, put cherubim and a flaming sword at the eastern gate. And they were essentially gatekeepers. And that Adam and Eve had to pass the test of the flaming sword and the cherubim in order to enter back into the into the presence of God. So here's the devil holding a flaming sword. I mean, this is you don't hear a sermon on the flaming sword anywhere these days, and they've got it in their tarot cards in these images.
Wow,
what's the flaming sword? That's the what I call the Abrahamic test. It's where Abraham was asked to sacrifice his son Isaac. You know, Abraham went 100 years or more without having a child, other than he had a son to his wife's handmaiden, Ishmael, and he didn't have any children. He had a narrative about being an abandoned child. He was abandoned by his father in the Islamic tradition, more so than what we read in the sort of Old Testament. But he was abandoned by his father. And so he left his country of birth and he took Lot with him because he needed somebody to connect with, you know, as an adult. And of course, what ends up happening is he and Sarah try and don't have any children until they have Isaac, and they're in their hundreds. Isaac's a young man, he's a boy, and God says, I want you to take him up to the mountain, I want you to sacrifice him, cut his throat and put him and burn him. That's the flaming sword, is the sword or the dagger for cutting the throat and the flame. But you see, and here's how we know that it was about Abraham's story, because God kept saying to him, son, you're going to have more children than there will be grains of sand on the beach and stars in the sky. So we knew it was a child issue. And that was his narrative. From his childhood, he had a narrative of not being abandoned. And so he needed to have this sense of fulfilling his own absence of love by giving it to somebody else. But he kept on being denied that. And then God said, I need to know that you love me more than you love your narrative. I need you to go and kill your child.
Wow.
He wasn't being asked to kill his child. He was being asked to sacrifice his narrative.
Yeah.
And, of course, he was about to cut his throat and an angel turned up and goes, there's a ram over there. You can sacrifice that instead. Beautiful story. But there's a lot in this.
Yeah.
And do you know that it's our narrative that establishes our desires? It's our childhood narrative that sets up what we desire in life in order to be happy. And what happens with that is it then controls our mind. So our mind is being directed by our programming as a child. Give me a child, and Aristotle said, give me a child until he is 7 and I'll give you the man.
Wow.
That's you and I.
Yeah.
We're sitting here, and if I saw a beautiful image of this one day of a 7-year-old as a puppeteer, and her adult self as the adult is the puppet.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what's going on for each of us. If you're suffering, you're in your narrative. Your 7-year-old is in control.
Wow.
That makes a lot of sense.
And then, and the answer is just back to awareness for that, to reviewing your narrative.
Well, it's about finding what the narrative is and being able to. Now, I guess it's appropriate for me to. My work, a big part of the work that I developed is that I teach people how to establish what their narrative is. I work with people identifying their narrative, and there's some. We talk about healing the wounded child, and there's a lot of work about. We don't heal the wounded child. In fact, we put, because the wounded child is the ego, and we put it on a pedestal, and you go, you little ripper.
Yeah.
And the reason we do that is that, in fact, our childhood narrative had us develop a whole lot of skills to survive. And in fact, it's the gift we gave ourselves to serve humanity. And all of those skills will be used as your way of bringing love to the world. You've got this skill set that this 7-year-old gave you that you'll be able to use to make a difference in the world. And so we get to the point where we don't have to heal the wounded child. We just need to be aware of it.
Yeah.
And we give it everything at once, which is accolade. And so we put it on a person and say, thank you so much. Look what you've given me, you little beauty. Happy as a pig in mud. Now we can move on. And being aware of what those gifts are, we're able to work out how we can make a difference in the world.
That's
it makes a
I
lot
think
of sense.
that's the gold, and that's the blessing, is being aware of what your gift is. And I think that's, like I said, you'll have tools around trying to figure that out, I guess, because you can sometimes see it in others and they can't see it themselves. You can see it like, this person is so good at this, this, and this, but they don't even know it, But it is funny reflecting on, like, how obviously into the body with my dad doing Feldenkrais stuff. And that's my gift to the world is movement. And I know that now. It's like, I don't think it, I know it. And we had dinner the other night and we're like thinking about what content do we do, or just sort of talking about business. And then basically what it come down to is like, well, how can you help people? Like, how, from what we know, how can we help people? And that was what keeps the ball rolling, basically. And it's like, how can I help people? What do I know that I know there's people out here that wish they knew what I knew right now, and just sharing that.
Yeah.
And then
How
it
do
makes you feel
serve?
good.
Yeah. How do you serve others?
Yeah.
And that's the only time I've ever felt fulfilled in this life, is when I've been like, okay, how do I align? And Arnold Payton says, have you heard of Arnold Payton?
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah. He just says, like, basically you won't, until your consciousness merges with the consciousness of the universe together to help to better this world we're in, you won't know happiness. And I honestly believe that, because once I was like, okay, I'm helping someone achieve their dream or fixing their body, then that was the first time I felt fulfilled for the first time, rather than when I used to surf, it was all about getting the good wave, or at jiu-jitsu, it's about choking the other person out, or, it's like, it's a good release for the body. But I found that when you're helping people, serving others, that was the highest form of
Fulfillment. Yeah.
And look, all of the illumination cards, which are the star card, the sun, moon card, the sun card, which are about higher illumination. It's about doing what you do with love. But there's a point which is the moon card, which is about charity. And charity, the beatitude that relates to that one is, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Now, what happens is, because the fact you can see God means that you're still in duality, okay? Because you see something, you're still in duality.
You're not blended in.
Yeah. But what happens in that place is that, you know, every time you work with a client here, you see God in the person you're working with. That actually becomes your modus operandi, is you see the divine essence of this person. There's no other way that you're going to treat them is with love in that place. So it's not just a discipline of love. Now it's love coming from the fact that you see the true nature of who this individual is. And so the spiritual journey is developing the consciousness and awareness that you can see with those eyes is what happens.
Yeah.
Is that you're actually got a filter where you have no other way of turning up in the world but with love and respect. It doesn't mean to say that you're not assertive and have boundaries and things like that, but you can do it with love.
Yeah. That's the ticket.
that is the ticket, man.
Oh, awesome. Well, how does someone work with you? How do they get in contact with you? And
if they go to my website, and it's just Russell Sturgess, RussellSturgess.com.au. And if they want to email me, just at me.com, russellsturgess@me.com. But
perfect.
Just go to my website and you can see all the things that I do there.
And I'd love to ask you this, man, because it's on both our sort of radars in the future. When you first wrote your book, like any tips around writing a book?
Be clear who you're writing for. My first book was written for me, and it's a head fuck. And so it's so academic. I've had several people say you could have got a PhD for that. But that was about me proving my value, but based on my narrative. My story wrote the first book.
Okay.
And here's the difference. My second book was an autobiography. That's different again. But then my third book was picked up by a publishing house in America, Inner Traditions, and it was written motivated by love of humanity. Two completely different books. Same topic, two completely different books.
Okay, that's a really good point.
One was to serve humanity, the other one was serving me. So you need to be, first of all, clear about who you're serving.
Yeah. Okay, that's a really good
point.
Yeah, to like have the language simple, have it all like if again, back to if I was this other person, what do I want from this person?
Who's your audience?
Yeah. All right, that's gold.
That's what I would say. If you've got a publishing house, find out how they want material presented, even though you haven't been approved. Ask them how they want things done. So I had written all of mine. They said, "Oh no, we need it in this format in Microsoft, and we need it to be set up with, double lined, and we need and you need all of that stuff." Find out how they want it done.
Yeah.
In terms of that, I would make sure that you've got some good personal people to go through and check it all, for you.
Yeah.
That you have that done several times. Having a real clear sense of what makes you different to what else is out there, so know what you're competing with. So have a look at what other products out there and what's going to make you different to them, and get really clear about that. Establish what the beginning, the middle and the end is. So how's it going to look? Even come up with your contents page right from the get-go in terms of how am I going to sequence myself through that process. I would have somebody that specialises in legalities, because when it comes to, if you do manage to get a book contract, it's then negotiating the contract in terms of what you want, what they want, and let me tell you, that's a minefield in terms of book contracts. So knowing somebody who's a specialist in being able to do it. Queensland Writers is a state organisation that will help, and it's probably worthwhile getting involved with Queensland Writers, because they give you lots of really good information, and they can give you support in that sort of regard. they're probably some core elements.
That's good, man.
To that.
Yeah, thanks for that.
No, that's okay. It's actually a huge task.
Oh, it takes years, right?
And
well, yes and no. Depending on how well you know your product and what you're doing, but anyway.
I guess that's a good point because I'm doing it for me in regards to I want to say I can write a book, but that's a good point. I can structure it doing it for the people. You know, like what do they need from me, and then I can do both because I'm not doing it all for money because I know there's easier ways to sort of
make money.
Yeah. I remember I heard this guy talk about it. He goes, it's one of the biggest jobs I've ever done for the lowest financial thing. And he goes, but I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And now I guess we've got a bit of chat GPT. So you can say, I'll put this double space lines, this font, rah. It's getting easier. That stuff's getting easier.
Yeah.
Well,
I know. The only other thing I was going to say was that one of the first people that I gave a copy of my first book to, I knew my English teacher from high school was living here at the coast, and I went and knocked on his door.
Oh, wow.
Because he gave me C's all the way through
No
high school.
way, yes.
And I said, here's my C.
Yes.
Wow.
Oh, they would have loved that.
Yeah, I was a C student too.
I dropped out in grade 8, so
Right. Wow.
early days.
Yeah, I didn't think you were allowed to do that back then, eh? You somehow got away with it.
I went to TAFE.
Oh, right.
So I did a bridging course into TAFE.
Okay.
That was the only reason they let me out of school.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, cool.
Well, thanks for coming on, man. Really appreciate it. That was uplifting. It's cool when you know, I can feel in your energy, but it uplifts people around you, you know, and it motivates, I'm sure, our listeners and myself again, just those little like tap ins, be aware, and I guess don't get pulled into, or I mean, we're going to, but be aware of the things that end. It's okay that they end.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Play in the garden, but don't get lost in it. Hey.
Yeah. And don't forget to use full stops.
Yeah.
I love that analogy. That was great.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah. All right. Thanks again.
Thanks,
guys.